Good morning and welcome to Coffee Time Live Special Edition. And if you're wondering why it's at the wrong day and the wrong time, it's strictly because of technical difficulties on this end, and rather than be late by a day or two with an upload, I decided just bring my 6 pages of notes and there won't be any editing, and I'm just going to do this live. So here we go. Topic today, it's a singular topic. This was going to be, as I said, just a regular uploaded video. The topic is 10 items, tips, suggestions on how to go about retiring in Ecuador or Colombia. And before I start, there's going to be a disclaimer, a 3-part disclaimer. First of all, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to assume you have already chosen where you plan to retire to, and that it's either Ecuador or Colombia. That's basically what I'll be speaking to. Number 2, this video, as always, but this video is my advice only based on my experience. Other people may have different experiences. Other people's lives may be different in a way that doing it a different way is better. But I think what I'm putting together here is going to suit the vast majority of people. And number 3, I'm going to suggest to you that even this video, you just use it as a jumping ground, and that you always use just real and legitimate sources only. You certainly don't want to get life information from a web page. Okay, item number 1. How much money do you need? This seems to be like high on the list of most people. And so I've got ABCD parts to this. First of all, your lifestyle. You have to be realistic about what your lifestyle is going to be. This idea that some people get because of some crap that they read on the internet, that they can, on $1,000 a month, they can live like a king, or on $500 or on $1,500, they're going to live like a king, and they're going to have servants come and wait on them, and chauffeur-driven limousines. And you have to be realistic, because it's not going to happen. You're going to have a heck of a lot more money than that. Also, how much money you need, it's got to be sustainable. So when you first go to a place, typically what happens is people have some funds saved up, and they don't get into their monthly retirement money routine that goes month after month for a while after they've been there. So they might come in and have $5,000 or $6,000 aside from that. So whatever spending you have initially, that isn't necessarily going to be sustainable. So you've got to look at that when you're creating a budget for this. And the third thing is you always want to be aware of various contingencies, like what ifs. Now, as regular viewers know, last year, about this time of the year that went on for a number of months, why doesn't matter, but I hit a financial problem, and I was living in destitution for a number of months. I thought I had planned, and I had a few things happen, and I rolled with it because I planned, but didn't quite plan enough. I managed to get through, but you have to think about what happens if you're getting Social Security. What will you do if something occurs, and I'll speak to this in a little bit about what could happen, and you don't get your Social Security money for, say, 3 months. How are you going to deal with that? So you want to take all those things into account. B, which country and where in the country? So, for example, when I lived in Cuenca, and then the first year, and then the second year, I moved to Giron, about 20 miles south of Cuenca in Ecuador. The cost in Giron was about half of what it was in Cuenca. rents, all kinds of things. Haircuts was $2 instead of $4 or $5. So within the country of Ecuador, there's various levels of expenses. Cuenca versus Armenia, there's a world of difference. What I live on here, I could not survive in Cuenca, Ecuador. Or Armenia and Medellin. Medellin is considerably more, maybe 60% more cost than it is here in Armenia. So what your budget is going to be isn't like, I'm going to Colombia and I can live on $1,000 a month. Well, where? And it's very important, and you need to be sure of the details of this, because you will have, for the most part, you're going to have a limited income. Also, of course, I don't have a lot to say on this, but if you're single or you're a couple, you have to take that into account. Now, I will say that a couple can live pretty close to what a single can live on, depending on what your lifestyle is going to be. And for D, I'll just bring this up because so many people have this idea that, well, I'll get there and I'll find a job. I'll get a part-time job. Well, first of all, there's legal issues with that as far as whether you're allowed to or not. For example, in Colombia on a retirement visa, that is not a work visa and you're not permitted legally to work. Doesn't mean you can't go down that path and make yourself legal, but you just can't come and get a job. And then there's a matter of what job you're going to get. When I was in Ecuador and doing these videos, I got so many questions about how can I come there and make a living so I can live there. And people living there can't find jobs. So are you going to come and steal one, or what makes you think you're going to get one? It's just not realistic and practical. If there's going to be any kind of other income that you can make, you better figure out how to do something online that'll make you money, because it's just not practical. And if you're looking at, well, I'm going to work and make money, be honest with yourself. Is that extra money or is that required money? If that's required money, you shouldn't be moving to wherever it is that's taking place, unless you have something absolutely locked in. But even then, for how long? I mean, a year from now, if that situation goes away, how are you going to sustain it? Go back to sustainable. So those are important things to consider. Number two, preparing for the move. I can't tell you enough. You need to put in effort. You can't just go to a $3,000 seminar sponsored by some website. You can't. Well, I looked on the internet, I went on Facebook, I read the forums, I asked questions, and pretty much everybody had these answers, and that's not going to do it. It's amazing how much bad information comes from what you might think is good sources of important things like getting a visa or tax information. Oh my God, when it comes to Colombian tax information, there's so much bad information, it's just crazy. So visa and residency, it's really critical that you get it only from the government sources. They have all the information on. You can get it through the U.S. Embassy webpage, or you can get it through the Colombian webpage for the government. That just tells you got to have this, boom, boom, boom. Or professionals, people that are actually doing the visas. Like I used a lawyer when I was in Ecuador, and here in Colombia, I used a company that all they do is visas and residencies, and it was pretty painless. But I emailed prior and worked out all the details, what I need, what it was going to cost, and what I have to do to get the second one, and to get residency. So you need to get that from sources. Don't even ask the questions on Facebook, because you're going to get bogus information. If you're going to ask a question, and the chances are slim to none that you're going to get an accurate response to your situation, why even bother? And people are constantly doing it. And the sad thing is people are listening to that and acting on it as though it's real. And so many people are getting themselves, caught in situations where they shouldn't have. So just use sources, especially when it comes to legal things like visas and residencies. You don't want any surprises. Uh, that was part A for number 2. Part B, banking. My advice, and I'm speaking primarily to people in the United States, if it's Canada or Britain or wherever, Australia, which I do have viewers, but not very many. So you can interpret um, however you want to. But for the USA, do not get rid of your USA bank, or um, better yet, make sure that you have either Capital One or a Schwab retirement account, because those will have no fees. Like Capital One, for example, I have a Capital One 360. I researched before ever moving to Ecuador. So 5 years ago, I researched this out, and I opened an account because I didn't have an account with them. The Capital One 360, it's totally online, and there are no fees whatsoever. There's no monthly checking account fees. There's zero fees. Schwab, I don't have it, but I'm told by people that do have it that it's the same thing. I strongly suggest that you do not use foreign banks. There's a number of complications that can come up, aside from the fact that they're heavy on fees, and you can have fees on top of fees. The regulations for that are kind of sketchy. They have them, but it's kind of sketchy. I had some money kind of pilfered out of an account that I had in Ecuador, never did get it back. So you have that. But a simple thing like, let's say you're retired and you're drawing money from the IRS and you're getting your retirement money. If you have a foreign bank, then you've pretty much told them, and you probably did tell them, that you're going to be living out of the country. And in my personal opinion, that's a big mistake, because then what happens, you go into a different category. And once a year, every year from that point on, you have to fill out a form and send it in to the IRS to prove that you're still alive. If you're using a USA bank and USA address and you're just traveling, which is what I'm doing, then you never have to fill that form. And you say, well, a form's not a big deal. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I know, I'm not going to tell you a bunch of horror stories, but I'll tell you one in particular that I'm aware of. It was somebody that I knew, didn't even know about this, and found out when the payment didn't show up. And then it took about 3 to 4 months, I don't recall exactly, 3 to 4 months to get it sorted out and get that money started again. So this goes back to part 1 of this. Even if you had known about it, filling the form out, what had occurred would have still occurred, and it would have been about, a fourth of a year with no retirement money. And he was in desperate straits. So, and there's other things, and I don't want this to be forever, but it's my advice is to make sure you have a U.S. address, and to make sure that you use a U.S. bank, and that bank would be Capital One or a Schwab retirement account. Now you can find some others, but I can tell you firsthand how well this Capital One account works, and every single person I know that has one, it's just perfect for them. How do you get your money? Well, you get your money off the ATM card, or you can, if it's a larger amount, let's say you're going to buy a bunch of furniture and you didn't bring the cash, then you can have World Remit send it for a couple dollars, come out of your bank, and I think you can withdraw up to $5,000 a month, maybe more, quite a bit. So my suggestion on banking, I was told when I went to Ecuador that I had to get a bank, so the lawyer took me and helped me get the account open, and I put, I don't know, some thousands in there. It turned out that actually wasn't the case. But through one reason or another, I ended up having 3 different banks in Ecuador. The reason doesn't matter, but I had 3 different banks, and they were all nicking me with fees. I closed them down, and they just acted like they weren't closed, and they kept doing fees. The one that I closed down was supposed to return some money, and that's one I never did get my money back. It's really problematic. If you don't need it, why bother? Why create potential issues if it's just not necessary to begin with? Okay, preparing for the move. C, what do you bring? What do you buy here? What do you sell there at home? It took me some time. I decided that I was not going to bring anything, and I sold everything. I got kind of fortunate, although I was marketing it this way, that I wanted to sell everything lock, stock, and barrel. And most everything I was able to sell in one big sale with a few extra things here or there. Came down to some things that weren't all that important that I just gave away. The money that I got from selling all those items, gave me a pretty substantial amount to start my new life with. Ecuador, it's more problematic because a lot of things are so much more costly. Had I come to Colombia first, I would have spent, maybe a third of the amount of money, to get started. I spent thousands of dollars to set up my household in Ecuador, and I didn't even spend $1,000 to set up my place here in Armenia. So, do you really want to lug all of those things down? And I know why you think about, well, I'll do a container. Okay, so you drop $5,000-$10,000 on a container to have your stuff when you really could have replaced it for the cost of the shipping. It's because you're comfortable in your life, and you've accumulated these things that give you this feeling of comfort just having them around you. I get it. I understand it. I'm the same way. My books were that way, books and guitars, and losing those, sacrificing them, cutting my books down to just, a handful was painful. It took me months to do it. Kept sorting back through them. What's important, and some that I brought I've actually already read a few times, but it's just a comfort level of having it. So I understand that. However, I'm going to suggest to you that you learn to break free from that. You can create a new comfort level. Do it on your terms. The expenses, you say, well, I've got that money for the move and I'm planning. You don't want to waste a dime because you never know what the future is going to bring. And so that 10 grand, you might be looking back at it 3 years from now saying, oh my God, I wish I had that money now. I found myself in that situation. So you don't want to get this mindset where that's what the money's for, so I'm going to blow it. Don't do that. Try to narrow it to your personal items, like you just can't part with. I got the largest suitcase they allowed on the airplane, and I got 2 of them, and I packed them. Now it was going to be free up to 50 pounds. Turned out that I just couldn't part with enough so that each one was a little over 60 pounds. So I had to pay $100 for each bag extra, and I bit the bullet and did it. I couldn't narrow it anymore. Chef knives that I'd had for a couple of decades. I wasn't going to leave them behind, and there were just so many things. I hardly brought clothes, and it's one of the reasons I brought all these black T-shirts and black denim jeans so that I didn't have to have an array of clothing. My array of clothing is a black T-shirt and black jeans for the most part. So spend some time thinking about that. Now you can do the container if you need to, and there's some people, well, I need to bring my motorcycle, I need to bring my car. Well, if it's not brand new, there's a good chance in either country you're going to have problems. But what you're doing with that thinking is you're trying to duplicate your lifestyle. I want to live like how I'm living right now. I just want to do it cheaper. And it's just not practical way to look at it. So you really need to kind of step back and think of it in a new way. For example, here in Armenia, I don't need a car. If you're living here, you don't need a car. As a matter of fact, the car is an added expense and a bit of a pain as compared to just not having the cumbersome automobile that you've got to, keep licensed and pay taxes on and put gas in and get caught in traffic jams. And you can just eliminate all those hassles. Okay, D, address. I mentioned a little bit. Keep a U.S. address, be it a friend, family. Worst case, there's pay services for about $19 a month. I listened to some internet suggestions about having a pay service, a mail service, and I got it. And the couple things that were sent to me when I was in Ecuador, I never got them anyway. And so I was paying $20 a month for something that I didn't use. So I got a hold of my half brother and said, hey, can I use your address? And he said, sure, no problem. And so I went and changed everything to his address, and that was the end of that. No more $20 a month. And one time something went to him. I kind of planned it that way. Something went to him, and he was coming down to visit when I was in Ecuador, and he brought it with him. But it was kind of a planned thing. I could have done it another way. So you keep your U.S. address so that your foot is in the door there, so that technically that's your permanent address, and technically that's where you're still living, and you're just on an extended vacation or extended travel. I'm telling you, I made all those mistakes that I've mentioned, and that's why I'm telling you to do it this way, because when it boiled down to it, I didn't need the banks here. I didn't need to have, a permanent address here. I didn't need the chain. It was best just to do it the way I'm explaining. Now, go back to disclaimer. Your particular situation might be different for one reason or another, but then be prepared for issues. Okay, part 2E, getting information. Ignore the internet, use official government websites, consider using an accountant if there's any tax issues, and a lawyer in the country, so in Ecuador or in Colombia. There's a lot of confusion about tax here. I'm tired of people trying to argue with me. I don't pay tax. It's not because I'm not doing it. I'm not required to pay tax. I do not know a single person that is having to pay tax in Colombia, with one exception, and that's only because he had a small business. He thought it'd be a good idea. But when you do that, all of your money comes up for tax, where my retirement money is not being taxed. So, but everybody's situation could be different potentially. So talk to a professional. Don't go on Facebook and say, hey, I'm going to have to pay taxes if I have an income, because they don't know. And they're just going to guess. And everybody seems to want to guess for worst case situation. So you'll see all this bad advice. You talk to an actual accountant or a lawyer or some kind of professional, or look on the websites of the government. Number 3, language. First of all, don't panic because it's a different language. If you don't know, just be realistic. It takes time. It's going to be difficult. It will be a struggle, but you'll get through because people down here are very accommodating. And I say this across Ecuador and Colombia. You'll run into issues once in a while. You'll get frustrated. There'll be some misunderstandings. But if you have some patience and just, oh, my bad, and just roll with it, you'll get there. Now, there's many options. For example, you can do Duolingo. It's free of charge. It's an internet-based Spanish language teaching. You can pay for Rosetta Stone. I did. I liked it better than Duolingo, but it didn't change the fact that after working with it for a year and a half, I hadn't learned squat from it. but that's me. Your learning style will have a lot to do with it. You can pay somebody to give you Skype lessons, so you can go an hour once or twice a week, and pay them $20, $30 or whatever, and you can get one-on-one teaching. When you arrive here in Armenia, for example, there are classes to teach Spanish. So you can go to those classes. There's language shares pretty much everywhere down here in Colombia and Ecuador, particularly around Cuenca. There's language shares, but the biggest thing for most people is just get out and around, and you'll go out and you'll hear a word and you don't understand it and you look it up on Google, but then you do that a couple times and you remember that word, and day after day after day you're learning new words and phrases, and that's, for me, it's kind of the best way. Number 4, how much are you going to miss your family? For some people, it's really important. You've got a lot of family and you're close, and you come down here and you think everything's going to be okay, and they're going to come see you. You're going to go see them a lot. It usually doesn't work out that way. And if you get homesick or heartbroken, particularly if you're a couple and one's fine here, but the other one misses the kids and the grandkids or whatever, the dog you left behind, that's something to seriously consider, because you don't want to come here and just be heartbroken all the time or miss something. So if that's a big problem for you, then you probably shouldn't move abroad. But be sure before you make these decisions and spend money and time. And the alternative is, when you're doing your budget, you can do a plan for the amount of money to make more frequent trips or pay for them to come down. But understand that whatever you're getting on your Social Security, for example, I said RS, but Social Security, whatever you're getting a month is probably about what it's going to cost you each time you go back. So if you plan on going back a couple times a year, then you're giving up a couple months of your Social Security retirement money. So you have to think about whether it's practical and if that's what you're going to do. Number 5, medical. Not a lot to say because I've covered this quite a bit, but in either Ecuador or Colombia, you can buy a plan that will get you through the basics and or more. In Ecuador, it's going to cost you a little over $100 a person. And here in Colombia, it's about, well, it's really cheap right now because of the exchange rate, but typically it's about $37 a month, and it gets you actually even better coverage, including dental and visual and things like that. It's kind of like the old Preferred Care HMO Gold plan. Number 6, cultural differences. It takes some adjusting, and you have to check your bias at the door. You can't think everything in the United States or Canada or wherever is superior, because you don't know the culture yet. And where some things are superior, you'll be amazed that after a while you find that some things that you thought were inferior actually aren't, that they work better, particularly here. So the thing is, if you don't know, don't act like you know and make a fool out of yourself. And people do that all the time. They're always pontificating about how it should be done this way or how it should be done that way. You really need to check your bias at the door. Yes, there are things like that. But when I travel around the United States, I see that all the time. Recently, there was somebody on Facebook that was complaining in Medellin about how in Colombia, if there's 2 people having dinner, they'll bring dinner to the one, and the other one might be waiting 5-10 minutes before they get their dinner, and how in the United States that would never happen. Well, it is a big thing in the United States, and any decent restaurant won't permit that to happen. I've lived in the restaurant world for a little while, and I know how important it is. However, there are places that you will go where it's not a big deal, or their service just isn't that good. The mistake that gets made is, I ran into it this time, therefore the entire country is like that all the time. Well, if I'm in the United States and I go to a restaurant that makes that mistake, does that mean every restaurant in the United States is going to be the same way? So that's a mistake I see made all the time. Don't make those mistakes. Not just because you might look like a butthead, but because you're misleading yourself. So pay attention to those things. Learning how not to tip, for example. Okay, so in Medellin, they've taken the pill and it's become a big thing, but through most of Colombia, it's not a thing, and it can be insulting, and you think you're doing something nice, but how condescending it is. Oh, those poor little people, they need that money, and like that. And culturally, there is a big difference about tipping here versus there. And the closer you get to regular Colombian culture that's been kind of untainted, the more you see how insulting it can be. If it's not tipping, then don't tip. So just adjust to what the culture is, and stop believing various anecdotes, like the guy the other day that said, what about I think it was actually here on one of these live coffee times, I heard there was a robbery and the guy went to court and he got off free. And what's the justice system like in Colombia? And it was kind of weird because I hadn't heard of that happening, but let's assume that it did happen. We don't know any of the circumstances. Is it possible maybe he was actually innocent? So you don't want to jump to conclusion over things like that and then paint the brush of it's all of Colombia. It could have been the worst situation in the world and it was corruption. He bought his way out or whatever, which is not such a common thing in most of the cities of Colombia. But let's say it was like that. Does that mean it's like that in all of Colombia? Or does that mean in the United States that it's not like that in any place? I know for a fact that there's some judges that can be bought in the United States. So, it's like, don't be jumping to these conclusions or making assumptions on various anecdotes. You can't assume all of Colombia is anything or all of Ecuador is anything until you've been there for a while and you know firsthand what your opinion is. Other than that, you're just adopting other people's opinions. Number 7, managing your money. I alluded to this earlier. It's important to actually have a real budget. In that, if you're in Colombia, you also need to plan for exchange fluctuations. So right now, today we hit an all-time high. We're over 3,900 pesos to the dollar. It's unbelievable. When I came a year and a half ago from out of Ecuador, the peso at the time was 2,800. So it's 1,200,000 pesos a month more in my pocket based on the exchange rate. Well, that's a wonderful thing, but what if it went the other way? So when I did my choosing for rent, I set the amount with built in if the peso goes to 2,500 or 2,200, and what would my budget have to look like? So just consider these things. In other words, if you say, well, I could spend as much as $600 for rent, then you might want to be thinking more about $400, and just to give yourself that cushion, that just in case. In Ecuador, it's dollar for dollar, so that part you don't have to worry about. Conserve your money. When people first arrive, I see this all the time. They feel rich because most people haven't been retired for very long, and so you come out of a lifetime of, I'll spend the money, there's more behind it, I got another paycheck coming, I've got different things you can do in the United States to pick up some extra cash, maybe I'll sell some things on eBay or whatever. Money is more accessible. When you get here, your money is locked in, and it is what it is, and it's not going to vary for almost everyone. And so when you first arrive and you got $5,000 in your pocket because you planned for the trip and everything, all you see how much everything is so much less expensive. You feel like you got all this money. Oh my God, 5,000. It's like I got 50,000. And you see people, I see people waste money. Well, it's not that important. Well, they can use it. It's like this and that and the other thing. It's First of all, it's a stupid idea that everybody's poor and needs your money. You need your money. You worked for your money. Forget about what everybody else is. And first, that's a big misconception. I did quite a video on it a couple months ago. It's a big misconception, but you worked for it. You need that money. And those people aren't going to be there to give it back to you if something happens and you find yourself backed into a corner. So being flashy and showing off money, that's unbelievably crude in both Ecuador and Colombia. That is not something to do, and it turns you into a target. It's just a silly thing. So remember the value of your money. It's your lifeblood. And when you're here, there really is no safety net. You're your own safety net. In the United States, the worst of things can go wrong, and you could always fall back on Salvation Army or something. There's always some way, somehow, to find some help. When you're in another country, they don't have those things. So you're your own safety net. And if you're treating it like it's expendable, it won't be there for the day that you actually need it. So when you come here, you want to be cheap. You want to be a miser. Just do what you have to do and discipline yourself that way. Number 8, are you going to be renting or buying? I say this all the time. Wait a year, basically the term of a typical lease, before you consider buying something, because what you think is perfect after living there for a while, you may change your mind. And it's easy and cheap here in Colombia to buy property. It's more problematic and more expensive in Ecuador to buy property. But finding buyers when it comes time can be difficult. And also people that are coming here tend to overpay because they see it as like, oh, that's so much cheaper. And they're always, this would cost me so much more if I got it in the United States. And so they don't even negotiate like they should on something that was already priced too high. Well, that's all well and good, but then if it comes time where you need to sell it, you're stuck. You overpaid. And so you're going to take a big hit somewhere. So I hope all that fictitious good feeling that you had stayed with you, because it's going to sting if you find yourself in that situation. Learn how to rent, learn how to negotiate. I say all the time to stay away from the agents. It's going to be more expensive. They're going to require big deposits. You're going to have a co-signer. There's all kinds of complications where if you're dealing directly with the owner, you can bypass all of that stuff. And to say, well, do I have to rent a place before I even come down? No, what you want to do is you can search. You can do internet search before you come down and just get an idea of what things are. Hopefully you'll have been able to make a visit, but everybody can't afford to do that. But if you made a visit, get a sense of where in an area that you want to live. When you get down here, have yourself an Airbnb or a hotel, something cheap, just something to sleep in. Save your money as much as possible. When I came from Manizales to Armenia, I pretty much knew where I wanted to be. I just didn't know what place. And I got an Airbnb for 10 days. I actually moved out after 8 because everything kind of fell into place. That gave me time for negotiating back and forth and doing what I needed to do. So when you come down, think maybe a month, but it probably won't take you that long. It'll probably take you a week or two. And what you want to do is go out to the neighborhoods that you're interested in and then walk the neighborhoods to get a better sense of what it would be like to live there. go into the buildings, talk to the guard. Do you have anything for rent? You don't really want to rely on the internet for actual rentals in Ecuador or in Colombia. You can, but it's going to be higher priced. The pictures very often don't really tell the story. You really kind of need to put in the effort to walk the neighborhoods and find something. Now, if you're in a situation where you're blind or crippled, or you can't motivate yourself around, or you're breathing off an air tank or something, and you can't really walk the neighborhoods, then you can find somebody pretty quickly that would be reliable for a small amount of money to go do it for you. Just have conversations of what you're looking for, maybe show some pictures, what's important to you, and let them do it for you. And then you can restrict your time in going just for the, what they found, instead of, spending a number of days out doing it. Okay, number 9, transportation. You really don't need to bring a car. Again, all these things that you fell in love with. I mean, I would have loved to have brought my motorcycle. If people, I'm asked all the time, is there anything you miss? There's a couple things, but high on the list was my motorcycle. I've had motorcycles my entire life, and my escape would always be on the weekend, get on my big old cruiser and just boom, 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 to parts unknown, and just have adventures, explore, and find new places to stop for lunch and new views to look at. I loved it, and I miss having that motorcycle. But the truth of it is, you have no need to have transportation here, because transportation is so good. And I'll say this for most of the places in Ecuador, most of the places in Colombia, and I say most because I'm not talking about country, but even in Giron, which had a population of 2,000 people, there was no need. There was taxis and buses and all kinds of things. So it's built into the culture here. So why don't I get a motorcycle here? Well, I could, because I could actually afford it, but it's very, they're dangerous here. It's not the same as riding in the United States. Motorcycles are actually hazardous. And from a guy that's had a motorcycle from the age of about 10 years old through almost my entire life, with only a few small breaks in between, I love riding motorcycle, and I don't have one. I keep, maybe, but it rains, a fair amount, and there's it brings so many issues. Plus, they're hazardous here. So yeah, I'm passing on it. There are certain reasons, you might need a car. Like if you were living in a farm outside of the city. But basically, it would be a waste of money. Now, I am trying to save for a car, but I don't need one for me personally. The only reason I'm trying to get a car is for these video projects. I can take a bus, but it is problematic doing what I do with a bus. It kind of locks in or locks out some things that I want to do or wish I could be doing. We go in about 40 minutes, and I'm almost done. Because it'll be under an hour. If there are any questions, I don't know if I've got many viewers. Today was a big surprise. I'm not expecting any live. But if you pose a question when I'm done, I'll see if I can answer a few questions before I sign off. So we're up to number 10. Whew. All right. Number 10, compromises and disappointments. And this relates to the cultural differences, I guess. It's important that you remember that different doesn't mean better or worse. It may be better, it may be worse, but give it a few years before you make that conclusion. Avoid having these thoughts, well, it should be this way, it should be that way. Well, in the United States, we did it like this. Well, in the United States, we did it. Imagine if you're Colombian or Ecuadorian. After hearing that a couple times, you'd probably be pretty sick of hearing it, which means you're going to drop a few levels and get to the point where maybe they don't even want to be around you because it's kind of insulting or annoying. You're trying to build up relationships because you need them. And so you don't need to be alienating people with some kind of egotistical, arrogant attitude. So you need to put yourself in check with that sort of thing. It is how it is because that's how they've decided it should be. Now, I don't change who I am. I still have my, same feelings and opinions, but some things I withhold my opinion until I'm sure. And what do I find? I find some things are better here. I find some things are worse. They could do it a better way, but it's not really my affair. It's not my business. It doesn't, if I have if I go into a business and I see that and that was my real livelihood, was efficiency in business. And if I go in, when I first went to Ecuador, it drove me crazy because I went in with that critical eye and I could spot, so many, it drove me crazy. I had to train myself out of that way of thinking. It's not my business. It's not my affair. They're happy doing it the way they're doing it, even if it's screwed up. But sometimes you find it's like, that's pretty clever. I never thought about that because of the situation here. It's different. So also, compromises, disappointments. Beware of your early attempts to duplicate your life. Again, I talked a little bit about this where you come and you want to have all your things and your stuff and you want to have the same kind of life. And even if it's subconscious, you may say, well, I want a new start and I want a new life, but actually in your head, you're trying to recreate what it was you had back in the United States or Canada or wherever. You want to be very careful of that. You need to open yourself up to having something different because you can drive yourself crazy over things. I can't get my hands on such and such. And you hear this all the time. Where do you find? Well, in Ecuador, it was a real problem because there's so many things you can't get your hands on. And so they've got to have people mule it from the United States, or you have to learn a workaround, or you just have to learn to live without. In Colombia, it's not so much that there's really nothing that I can't get my hands on. But what happens is for the first period of time here, you don't know where to get a hold of these things. So as far as you're concerned, they're not available. Well, I went into this store or that store or that store. I don't see them anywhere. I don't see them. Well, there'll be sources. And as time goes on, you will learn. And if you don't burn all the bridges of making those friends, they can help you with that. I have found so many things that were available that I thought weren't available. But you just got to know somebody, kind of. So things may not be the same, but give it time. Just relax. It may take you a couple years to get certain things. It's like I saw somebody here in Colombia complaining because they can't get Instant Pots. Well, yeah, you can. I mean, they're on Facebook Marketplace, but I can order one from Amazon. It's $74 on the Amazon website, and it's $14 for shipping and handling, delivered to my door here. So just because you don't see it right away or where you think it's going to be doesn't mean that they're not available. It can really get to you if you allow it. So before you even come here and make that move, make that change, just consign yourself to, well, if I can't find it, so what? There's enough other benefits. I won't worry about it. And you kind of, as you're out looking, it's like, hey, you wouldn't happen to have one of the, oh, really? Oh my God, I've been looking for a year. Okay, so you got it. I will tell you that I find almost nothing compromised in Colombia. Ecuador was much more of an issue. But even that, those things change over time, and there's things they have there and available now that 4 years ago wasn't the case. So, time can be your friend also. Now I'm going to give a little bonus, or a 10 plus, and this is a pretty important one, is have a plan B. let's say you move to Cuenca, Ecuador, you move here to Medellin or Armenia, Colombia, and you live there for a year for whatever reason. Oh my God, I miss my family too much, or there's I didn't know it was going to be so polluted and crowded in Medellin or Cuenca. I didn't have any idea it was going to be so expensive to live there, or whatever it is, whatever the issue is, and you either have to or want to leave, have a plan B ready. It's like for some reason you couldn't get your visa. I almost left Ecuador when after 7 months I still didn't have my visa. I was so frustrated and I was so tired of the bureaucracy that I said, if one more thing pops up, I am out of here. I am done. But I had a plan B. You need to have a plan B, and it needs to be financed. So you've got to put something back. If wherever it is you move to falls through for whatever reason, what is your option? Um, I can't really say it was a plan B, but I'm not going to talk about why I went to Ecuador or Colombia or whatever. I've talked about that in the past. But if that were the case, if I were in Cuenca and the altitude got to me and that was my reason, I simply could not live there, which was not, it was just the final reason. But if that was it, then I could have a plan B to come here to Armenia. Or maybe it would be a plan B to return to the United States. But if that's the case, did you buy property? Do you have tens of thousands of dollars worth of household goods? Now you got to figure out how to get rid of it. So keep these things in mind and have a plan B, and have that plan B ready and workable. Reevaluate it ever so often. For half of the people that make this change, you're going to want a plan B, uh, wherever it is, for whatever reason. It just seems to be how these things work out. So that's what I got for today. Let me look, see if there's any questions. If you have a question, please proceed it with 4 question marks. I'll answer it, and then we'll be done for today. There will be a live Sunday actual coffee time. And the plan C. I agree, actually. Says it's over 4,000. I haven't looked since I've been doing this video, but I looked just before the video, and the official one that the bank uses, that I can actually draw on, was 39.28 or something like that. But I wouldn't be surprised. The more the stock market goes down, the more the peso is going to go up. And when the stock market rebounds, which it will, and it will pretty quickly. It may take a month or two, but it's going to go back up and it'll actually hit a new high. Then the peso is going to drop back down, and it's probably going to settle back down around the 3,000, 3,200, 3,500 range. I just wish I had some money today to go capitalize on this, but I get some money next week sometime, so hopefully it'll still be up there, because this is a significant amount of increase. This is like real money in your pocket. From the time I came here to what the rate is today, it means about $500 a month more in my pocket. That's crazy when you're trying to live on 1,000 or 1,100, 1,200, whatever. That's a huge amount. Okay, no questions? Last call for any kind of question that you have. Probably not. I think the people that are watching this on the early are regular viewers, and so much of this I've covered in a lot of different things. I wanted to put it into one video to kind of make it easier for people. So I'll be storing this in the playlist of the how to expat, or how to live the expat life, or whatever that is, in the channel. Okay, well, that's it. I've got an interview of a gringo today. I want to mention quickly the coronavirus. First of all, YouTube did not like that video. It's still up, but they've taken away any kind of monetization to it, which is funny because they're still running ads and collecting the money. But there were two things in there that were kind of big mistakes. The first one, you don't hear it because of the microphone, but there was a ton of noise that was going on once I started that video, and it was really distracting me. And there were two places I just lost my train of thought. The first one, when I talked about all those wild animals in China, but I missed the entire point of that as to why, and it's a cultural thing, why it's like that there. So I kind of missed that entire thing, and I won't go into it here. But the second one, which was more problematic and was pointed out to me by a longtime viewer, and he was right. My math, when I was talking about death rate, and I threw out, I said that the World Health Organization was misleading people and they had it at 3.5. And then I lost my train of thought, and I had my notes in front of me, and it showed the calculation for in the US, it was 366 people at that time and 19 deaths, and it was 0.04. And I saw that, but I got very confused and lost my place, and I lost my entire point. And I said it was less than 1%. Well, it's actually 4%. My point was that the death rate is meaningless because there's not enough information. And I didn't even get to say this because I just you should have, if I turned the microphone, you would have known. There was a jackhammer that was going off. There was all kinds of stuff. The death rate it's a ridiculous stat right now, and that's why when World Health Organization came out and stated that it was at 3.5, is such a bad stat. All it would do is panic people with bad information. In South Korea, where it's actually kind of, it's not done, but it's run most of its cycle. Therefore, the numbers statistically are a lot better. They're under 1%. So the 3.5 just didn't make sense. I intended to say these things, and I didn't. And so if you think I just can't do math and I didn't know what I was talking about on that because it's really 4% in the US, well, it's not, because they don't even know how many in the United States, and they won't know until this thing is about burned itself out. It's just, how do you know? You can't know. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm aware of those two glaring omissions. I'm not going to go back and change it. You know, life goes on, and half of the stuff will be obsolete in another week or two anyway. But my apologies for the distraction. Today there was a couple moments, but for the most part, wasn't distracted. I probably shouldn't say IRS when I mean Social Security, though. Okay. All right. So no questions. We'll end it. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found some value with that. And we're out.